That might be good, or I can turn the camera.
One person participate.
Yeah, yeah,
Just a way. Cool. So, have any of you flipped or been flipped before?
I have not.
Not that I'm aware of.
Aspects of the course.
Okay. Like what kind of aspects?
Just trying to get them involved in terms of them doing more teaching and more presentations and more kind of collaborative work, conference style things, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, still venturing into it, getting the toes wet, trying to go deeper.
Yeah. Have you been flipped?
Maybe to some extent. My main theory teacher in college did a lot of like, here's a worksheet, do that, and kind of like you're figuring out what you're doing as you go. So like he'd give us a little information and then we can dive in and learn things as we go along.
Okay. Yeah, I think as we've had this discussion in the past, one of the things that tends to come up is that a lot of us have been flipping without knowing it or without having a specific term for it for a while, especially when we see the broadness of the definition. The most, in fact, I'm in the middle of doing an online course for hybrid pedagogy on the flipped classroom right now. So I've swung through the literature quite a bit the last few weeks and found that one very common definition of the flipped classroom is you give students you flip the informational delivery and the active work, so that informational delivery moves out of an in-class lecture into online videos, and then the active work that's normally homework and project and things gets much more centered in class time. And so as we've talked with music folks, a lot of the times that just sounds like oral skills, where class is mostly doing stuff and you might read at home, and a lot like maybe an English class where you read at home and then class is discussion or activities or acting things out. But that definition is very narrow, and it's often pushed most often by people in the educational technology business or in journalistic circles, where the watchword is personalization, personalized learning, and which means algorithmically driven learning, where the technology is advancing people at different paces, and it actually then makes a situation where individual students are so personalized that they're not connecting with other students. They might get FaceTime with the faculty as they're working, but it often turns class into, if you follow that model strictly, it looks like a study hall where everybody's working and the teacher's walking around kind of keeping people on task, and they're using Khan Academy videos or whatever the situation is. And most faculty and most people who are in education who write on the flipped classroom have a much broader definition that focuses on active student work in class and almost always some collaborative element or some kind of social connected learning. You'll see a high amount of connectivist learning theories from people flipping as well as cognitive constructivists. So it's the idea of students need to be working and doing things in order to build knowledge, and they do that by learning how to use each other and how to use the internet and books and all the other resources they have well. And so flipping then ends up having a whole bunch of different ways that it could look. And one way that video at home and homework in class is the basic flip. And so that's the first section. I'll put a link in the Google Doc when I get a chance to rinse in my article on three methods for flipping. But really there are more than that. So basic flip, watch a video or read a textbook at home and do active work in class. And then maybe follow up with more active work outside. But you always start together in class, taking advantage of having the professor and the peers together with the students. Then there's things like just-in-time teaching, which essentially is you give students some kind of preliminary assignment to go with that reading or video so that you can get some data before class starts about what they did and didn't understand, so you can make some adjustments to what you do in class. And you can do that even if you're lecturing. You can use those kinds of online quizzes. There's peer instruction, which involves some component of, so those of you who've used clickers have used peer instruction, where students are given a chance to work through something on their own, but then they have to talk to each other and try to convince each other that they've got it right. It also could be peer evaluation if you're doing a writing assignment or in our case maybe a part writing assignment, model composition analysis, and then comparing notes with each other and trying to convince each other, having a little debate. And the logic behind this is that if you are, those teaching theory, we've been doing this for a long time, and most of us got it pretty easily the first time, and that's why this is our career path, because it's something that came pretty easy. And for many of our students, that's not the case. So having someone who struggled with it a little more, or who has a non-expert perspective, or who just recently figured it out and remembers what the difficulty was, has a better chance of explaining successfully to another student in a way that they'll understand than the professor does. And of course, there one student is getting 2 or 3 or 4 perspectives, as opposed to 30 students getting 1 perspective. And so it's just it has an advantageous way of working. And then I guess the last example throughout there is inquiry-driven learning, which is where it's related to problem-based learning. Students are given a question first, and then information follows after they've started to wrestle with the question. So the question could be, for example, the beginning of my pop rock form unit, I often will give students a song that sits on the border between verse, chorus, and AABA. They've read nothing on either of them, but they have some information and some knowledge and some intuition already. And so I want them to learn how to apply that into this unfamiliar scenario, and also to identify the specific problem areas so that they have questions in mind before they do the reading, before I get up and talk to them about it. And so I could give them Pleasant Valley Sunday by the Monkees. Is this verse, chorus, or AABA? Because it's got a lot of the hallmarks of both. But the reading then settles all debate once you realize some of the particulars of how that works. But they have a lot of information already in their minds that they can bring to it. And then they, working with another partner who has different information, they can bring that together, start to use each other, and start to develop that skill of how do I take what I know and apply it in a new situation, which ultimately over the duration of all of our courses, if we do that a lot, is a really solid skill they end up with, which they can use with new genres of music, new activities, new styles that either weren't part of the curriculum or didn't exist when they went through the curriculum. And all of these things have at their core student-centeredness. It's the opposite of what we're doing right now. Me talking and some of you are writing things down. And it's what do you already have that you can bring to bear to this scenario? And what questions does this piece of music arise? Or maybe how might you approach the question that I give you that you might face in your career? Or just your general thinking and discussing music. And then let's work together to build the skills that we need and access the information and where necessary, memorize it and have that as a solid base that we can build on, rather than focusing on information delivery. So information delivery still happens, active work still happens, some kind of individual and group learning still happens, but by moving these things all around, either the place or the time, the effect is that the pride of place is given to the students' work and their inquiry and their skill building rather than the teacher or the content or the delivery of that content. And the students end up engaging information at times where it's a little more advantageous to them. Not 8 a.m. with a bunch of people sitting in the room while someone talks to them, but on their own time with maybe multiple resources, video, text, whatever. They can stop, they can reread. They're not focusing on getting it down, they're focusing on, wait, what did that mean? Or maybe answering questions on a quiz. And then in class, now they're in a better position, at least this is the idea, they're in a better position to develop their skills because that work, they have a lot of helpers. It also keeps them awake. We get stuck with the early classes and it's good to have doing stuff, you know, which again, I think a good lecture-based class will do a lot of this stuff anyway, right? You'll have some group practice, you'll have some activity, you'll sing some things, you'll improvise some things. So it's not, you know, an earth-shattering shift for a lot of music faculty. It's simply taking advantage of that stuff that we're already doing a little bit and saying, hey, there's some good theory behind this, and let's think about how we might reorient things around that stuff.
it's also worth mentioning that this is kind of like the traditional model of teaching, which is that you have people read a textbook between classes, and then you come together and discuss it. So that's the information delivery outside and then engaging with the material. And part of what makes it exciting now is that, of course, we've got multimedia. And you can do video micro lectures, you can send people to websites, whatever, and people can enrich that learning. Or they can happen in more efficient ways outside of class. At the same time, it has implications for assessment, because if students are doing their homework in class, that means that the traditional model of nobody can talk to anybody else about their homework, and it's due right at this time, figure out a way to get it done by then, that sort of thing can't work so well. So that's part of why people get into things like standards-based grading and problem-based learning and stuff that we'll be talking about.
Yeah.
Can we come together a little bit?
Like a little close, yeah. Let's try to stay on camera. Actually, I was off camera, but yeah, we can get a little closer. We don't have farther apart makes us talk loud enough that Dave
That's true.
never interferes, but-
We don't have to close off this side of the circle. Still talk loud.
I'll try to keep track of the tweets here, in case there's some questions or thoughts coming in. But I know Bryn and Dave were following along a little bit, and they both have some experience with this. So. Yeah, on assessment, what I found really interesting is that when a lot of our assignments, and it's only for some students that this is true actually, but we grade things often because we want them to do them. And so sometimes we just want them to practice, but we don't really care if they get it right or wrong. We give them points for effort, or say you just have to do it, you get full credit, or that kind of thing, or we make it really easy early on. And then that gets into all kinds of problems in terms of how we weight the grade to make sure that at the end, like they have to do well to get a good grade, but we're using them in some significant portion as carrots and sticks along the way. Well, when students are doing that work when we're there, the easy thing to do is to do it. Right at home, the easy thing is not to do it, unless there's some motivation, whether intrinsic or extrinsic. But when we're all together, even the laziest student, when you're standing right over their shoulder and say, they'll engage. And so we don't have to worry quite as much about being wardens and disciplinarians. We can just say, hey, this is what we're working on today, and let's see what we can do with it. And we can get that engagement without worrying about carrots and sticks, which again, I found in some of my classes, especially the small ones, that extrinsic motivation doesn't really have a statistically significant impact on whether or not they do the work. If there's a social component, if they're exposed when they don't, and if we have a good rapport. Big classes, that's a little different, but it does open up to where now we don't have to grade quite so many things, and which means we can spend a little less time doing it, potentially, and a little more time either meeting with students one-on-one who need some extra work, with some extra help, or doing our research, or preparing some new activities for the class, or developing if we're doing videos or new resources, making those for the students. So it does free us up a little more in terms of what we're doing, if we're in that kind of scenario. I've also found doing assessments during class time can work if we read often enough. Here we don't. But in Charleston, I had 6 hours a week for combined theory and oral skills in the keyboard lab. So we would have at least one, sometimes 2 days per week, the 50-minute classes, which were practice and assessment days. And so you've got an analysis to work on, or some skills to practice on the keyboard, or some sightseeing to work on. My office is right next door. So we just get a list going on the whiteboard, and anyone who's ready to assess one of the standards for the class can sign up. Come to my office, do that, or I walk over with headphones and plug in your keyboard. And the others were just working on developing skills that they weren't ready to assess. When I came by, then they could ask a question, or they could ask each other, work together. And so if you have that kind of time and space, you can get, in that case, I was in a class 18 hours a week. But I was grading less, and a lot of it was happening during class. And so I actually felt less overwhelmed than in some other scenarios where I was doing so much prep and grading outside for a shorter class time.
So,
Yeah.
From what I've heard, is that Tim's observation that the old delivery method of reading assignment outside of class and then the students come to class, really isn't that different. And so flipping to me in that model isn't really that different. But for my own self, and This is like going all around, isn't it? So I'm gonna like make a horrible confession here. So, you know, I have my reading assignments, but how do you give up control? Because I would do that, but I would end up lecturing anyway, which was like completely redundant and, you know, and completely pointless. And so how do you, I mean, what kind of thinking does it take to give up that kind of, I'm the expert and I'm giving you the information? And how do you trust the students to be able to do the work that you want them to do in a way that is appropriate and that they're actually learning the material?
Well, one answer is that many students have difficulty reading textbooks. I've heard this from a lot of students that I ask them to read 3 pages of the Pending Marvin textbook, and they say, I have no idea what that said. I just don't understand what these terms mean. And if you do a video lecture, the nice thing is it dovetails with whatever you're doing in the class. So whatever terms you're using in the lecture, presumably you're using in the class. It has a specified time frame. So you upload the video and it says 10 minutes. And so they know how long that's going to take to listen to. And it may be a medium that's more familiar to some students than reading a textbook that's trying to incorporate the latest theory of pedagogy and trying to get you a little bit into Schenkerian analysis and also introducing the forecourt and that sort of thing. So part of it may just be format, that it's a more easily digested format for more students. And there may be room for trust, just in trusting them to embrace that.
Oh, I mean in the classroom.
Oh.
Like I don't, to me the delivery system kind of is gonna be a personal choice. And I think if students have problems with the text, I think that's actually something you can address in class. But yeah, I mean, but when you do the okay, here's a worksheet or get out the workbook and I want you to look at problems and blah blah blah, and you're walking around the class or something like that. You know, that to me is, how do you know your students are, well, you know, because it flips around, because it kind of, because what I want to say is, how do you know students are doing the things the way you want them to do it, you know? And they're not like, I don't know, taking some approach that might be a little unconventional, but will still get there, or even just, you know, if you partner up, how do you make sure that both, you know, everyone in the group is doing all the work and somebody's not slacking and, you know, and some other people are doing everything.
Yeah, so
So that's
I mean, a big part of this, you get to know the students over time. And so over time, you set patterns for this is how we're going to do it. That's why it's really helpful in the first semester that you're flipping or the first semester that your students are experiencing it, that there's some kind of regular routine. When I brought in multiple ways of doing things, I mean, having multiple ways of doing things has an advantage, as students gravitate towards different methods, but having some consistency day to day, especially early on, means that they get used to the routine. They're like, this is what we're going to do. And often when it feels weird to them and they're uncomfortable with it, or it's just unfamiliar, like, look, this is actually a lot more like a studio class or a seminar than maybe like a class, but it's something you're familiar with. You would shed at home. And in your lesson, you're working through, or in chamber rehearsal, you know, you're working with your student colleagues through what you know, what needs to be done, trying to identify problems and solve them. And then you take them home for individual work. So I try to grab models that they know and give them some consistency so they can learn that new model. But then also I start to get to know them and figure out, because I definitely do. I learn names faster. I get to know personalities a little faster in this kind of a class. And so you start to think, okay, so this group needs a little more of my attention to make sure that they're focused, or that they're thinking about things in a helpful way, or they might need me to check in a little more often. This group doesn't need me quite as often, but I still need to check in so that they don't think I'm ignoring them. I just teach them at the bottom of the class or something, you know. And so there becomes a new dynamic to teaching which for theorists and composers, you know, having that analytical approach. I'm trying to collect data and analyze that. I mean, it's real human data, just like our music. It's creative human content. It's not just numbers, but you're getting to know, and this is Maria Montessori writes about this, where the primary goal or the job of the teacher initially is observation. You're figuring out who these people are, how they work, and what works for them. And then I've got some videos that I might be able to show at some point. I didn't prepare to bring them in, so I'd have to dig through a little bit, but I can't stream them because they're students, but I can show you how, when this group is doing really well, and this group is just having a lot of trouble with it, I can switch people between the groups. So you guys just switch for a little bit. Or I can split them up if the group is too big. Say, you really need, why don't you three come over here? 6 is too many for this, because then people will pull their weight. If 2 or 3, they'll usually pull their weight, and they're a little more likely to voice their concern or their questions, their misunderstandings as they go, especially if it's a friend. So I let them pick their groups as long as it's not problems, because they can be a little more vulnerable with people that they like. And they're more likely to see those people outside of class. When I've assigned groups, they've had a really hard time getting together outside of class, but if they can pick their groups, even when they're assigned, they're more likely to talk to each other about what they do.
There's also research that shows that when students are more self-directed, they're learning better and they will stay engaged better. So there's this, you can do stuff with atmosphere. So rather than walking, I mean, sometimes if it's just a worksheet, I'll just walk around and say, oh, you might want to check this one, just check whether it's right or wrong. But if it's a more collaborative project, like if students are asked to write a phrase or something like that, that involves some core and you've got a group coming together, I just like pull up a chair, I don't even stand over them, and I'm like, so tell me what you've done so far. And so then it's not me directing the process, but it's them directing the process. And the more they feel like they're directing the process, I've found the more engaged they are. I've had the opportunity to teach the same class of students through now 2 years of theory recently, and I've had that attitude throughout. They're great at working in groups during class time. And I think it's just because they're used to it from the beginning.
Does it transfer over then, so if they end up having like a midterm exam or final exam where they have to be on their own working, does it ever become like a crutch where they have to have other people to kind of help them work through it, or do you feel like
one solution to that problem is to have alternate forms of assessment. And again, we'll probably talk about that later. But I've done very traditional ones as well, and I find that when they're in groups, I've gotten lots of student evaluations that said, I finally understood this once I worked with my peers and they can explain it to you. And part of that's just that, if they're working together for half an hour, that's 3 people, that's like a very close interaction, as opposed to you explaining it to the entire class for half an hour. There's a lot more negotiating of those difficulties, and then I do find people can do things like that.
And what I've found on the flip side of that is that if there's too many people that don't get it or that feel really uncomfortable with the process, that can shut it down for a lot of people. And so if you read the literature on peer instruction, just on clicker questions, the guidelines are if it's between like 35 and 75% of the students have it right on the initial clicker data, then have them talk to each other. More than that, and it gets useless. And if everyone around gets it and that one person doesn't, then they feel bad. So it doesn't quite work well. And if it's less than that, there's not enough people out there with the right answers, the right logic for it to be valuable. And I found in some of the more extended group work that not percentage of people who already understand it, percentage of people who are comfortable with the process, or it needs to be a little bit higher than that. Otherwise, you'll get a group where there's 3 people and 2 of them are like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they might actually, if they just sat down and had to do it for homework, say, okay, I can figure this out, and it will only take them a few minutes. But especially, I found like the honors students who have gotten used to a certain way of doing things and have done really well at it, can sometimes bristle at being asked to expose their initial, if not inadequacies, their not yetness of understanding to their peers. And so that's something that I had one section in particular last semester that really, really did not like flipping this stuff, because there were a lot of those students that were like, I want to be comfortable in class at every moment. I want a clear presentation of information. I want to take it down. I want it to make sense as I'm writing it down, and then I can go and do everything else on my own. Even though the research shows that that clear information delivery actually keeps the brain from doing the work that it needs to do to build strong deep understanding. And because everything goes through the short-term memory and no danger is flagged, and therefore no hard wrestling is done by the working memory. And so we have, that doesn't mean give a bad lecture to teach well, but it does mean design situations where the students will have to do some hard work with their working memory, things within their grasp, but things which take some effort. But we also have to do some salesmanship and some tech support, moral support. So, this is actually why it's valuable. And here's some results from past students, or here's some results from you in the last unit. And really coach them along and get that they have to trust you, that you know what you're doing and that this will be valuable. And that discomfort is an important part of learning, that without that happening at some point, you're not actually learning. And usually that happens when you're on your own, so you attribute it to yourself, and then you just beat yourself up and you get it. In the classroom, they can attribute to the instructor. And so you get negative evaluations because the people who are used to being comfortable and everything being clear and easy are now maybe learning better, but it doesn't feel like they're learning better. I can recommend a book on this to kind of to sell you all on it, and also for you to sell your students, called "Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning." And they really hammer some of these points home. I'm gonna have my students read the intro to that this year. But they're also, when students are not sold on it and then don't do it, they don't get the learning because they didn't have the motivation to take ownership. And that's where a lot of the process ends up being. You have to teach them some pedagogy so they can teach themselves, so they can learn how to learn. You also have to sell them on the process so that they're willing to put the effort in. And small classes, it's a piece of cake. A big class that meets 2 hours a week, it can be difficult unless they get it in small bites and can see before too long this is bearing some fruit. And so this is just some things to think about. I have a couple of pictures since I don't have video ready. One thing that we did, I found that students standing helps keep them engaged, and a lot of people find it for oral skills, have them stand and sing, stand on the piano, we get groups. I also found that when they're sitting at desks and I'm walking around, as soon as I get there, I'm authority, they stop talking to each other, questions to me. So sometimes I won't walk around, I'll just listen from one side of the room, kind of walk around the side so I can listen to different groups and get the information I need before we follow up. But for an inquiry-based task for 20th century music, I gave them WC's Gulf Cathedral and had them just mark out the form, because the form is dead obvious to everyone. And then say, okay, now look at the score, and I'll play it quietly looping while you talk, what specifically changed there, or what specifically came back that you heard before. And then that starts to open up, oh, it's the tonality change. Oh, there's a key signature change. Yeah, I could change key here. Oh, the key signature did change here, but now there's like these weird whole tone that like they start, and then invariably someone knows the name for something of these in the groups, and then they can start to teach each other a little bit, and then they'll read, and I'll walk them through stuff. So what I did was I print off the score and I taped them together and I put them in places around the room and had them just grab people next to them. I do this in oral skills. When I teach them here, I have groups of like 3 at different places on the board, and then they'll do a dictation together and then switch parts and talk to each other as they go. And I can stand in the middle and just see everything. So I have all the data I need. And so this is just them working on this task. This group had a little bit of trouble staying engaged, and so I just spent a little more time with them. This group had everything down in like 15 minutes. So I checked in with them a couple times, but what I did then was like, okay, you guys have got what I'm going for. Now what about this thing here? And because and that's where the expertise really comes in. It's like I know things that are not going to be on the syllabus, but if they're ready for it, they've got the time, they're here, instead of just like, these 2 are dating, it's like, worry about that, like, what about this? And I know, like, I think the funny thing with this particular group, it's not showing the camera, I feel like you know a couple of these, is that you give her a question, and like, if she has nothing to do, she'll just screw up the rest. You give her a question, and oh man, she doesn't know the answer to it. She will figure it out, and she will get them to participate. So and these 2 are they're bright, but they're kind of they're in college. They've still got some outlets, some hormones going on, and they're just kind of having fun. But if she's going for that question, their brains will start going too, and they'll really. So I can give them something that maybe some other groups don't have the readiness to do. And so everybody's working on the same thing, the same piece. They're getting a lot of the same content, but there is some of that personalization that can happen okay, you're ready for something else. You know, why is this going on here? Or I think the question I gave them in this is, first, so where are those whole tone collections coming? And it's always a transition, isn't it? So why does WC use the whole tone at points of transitions? I'll give you a hint. Bartok does this too. Why does it always come up at a transition? Why isn't it a theme? And that really got them going. I don't think they really found an answer to that, but then that became part of my lecture at the very end of all of it, so everybody got the information, but they got a little more probing on it just because they were ready for it. And that was able to keep them engaged because they gave the questions and really push them beyond what was already easy for them.
It seems like there's a lot of very clear-cut advantages to this approach, and a lot of us incorporate this kind of stuff, at least to a small extent. But I've met some people where you say flipped classroom or something, they just kind of cringe. What's the reason for that? Are there some clear disadvantages that people focus on, or is it just
For one thing,
needing
it's
to
too
balance it?
trendy, and so it's one of those things that college administrators get really, really excited about when they come to departments and they're like, you need to do this and use this product and record videos, and people are like, whoa, you want me to change everything that I'm gonna do and use these commercial products and stuff like that? That tends to be a conversation that happens. So that's one of the big reasons people are not so excited
I mean,
about it.
I think it's definitely uncomfortable
Mhm.
because it is contrary to the lecture format that we're used to.
Yeah.
And because you're not engaging the students, you're in control of everything and you know what you need to do. So it's all the prep and everything is focused on you, and that's the most comfortable place to be.
And I think along the lines of the tech, like as we're talking about, you could just print out some scores and put them up on the wall and just have looked through the piece and reminded yourself of what's going on there. And that's actually really easy prep, and you have nothing to grade. They're going to go home, and you might give them a question to bring back the next class, or an online quiz where you give them some, you have to come up with a few questions or something, but you're not going to be doing a big grading chore, so it's actually pretty easy to do some of those things. But the idea of, so you're saying I have to take all of my lectures and turn them into video, and I don't know how to use this stuff. Professional quality video,
Right.
and then I've got to make new kinds of class activities and new assignments. Like I'm up for tenure next year, I'm still waiting to hear back on revisions from this article, and it just becomes this big thing where actually most people who are sensitive to the needs of their students are flipping, or they're doing something that can be in the big tent of flipped or inverted classroom. If you start to use words like flipped, you're referencing books by teachers that don't cite scholarly research on pedagogy sometimes, and you're connecting yourself with Forbes magazine and EDU Week and things where they're now citing Khan Academy, personalized learning, and algorithmic this and that, and the classroom looks totally different, and it's a lot of work and it's really expensive, and some people make a lot of money off of it, and it's not us. If you use inverted, you're now talking the language of higher ed scholarship of teaching and learning researchers, and it means the same thing. And so for a while I always said inverted, partly to be snobby and partly to kind of make that distinction. But I've gotten a little more comfortable with flip just because then everyone knows what you're talking about. And then I'm trying to write some things that change that. Like I wrote a piece, the 6 myths of the flipped classroom, on my blog. And it was like, no, it's not all about the video. No, it's not all about everyone doing a different thing at the same time. No, you don't need to manage all that stuff. It could be just, some student activities, some social learning, And so I think a lot of the bristling does come from those kind of things, that it's not necessarily completely different. And you don't have to be a professional video maker.
And I very much blend learns now. Like I found that I got really into this, and I bought Camtasia, which is a screen testing software, and I was like, I'm gonna make all these videos and it's gonna be great. I made a couple and I was like, well, that's okay. But I really want to use my traditional teaching for some things. But just embracing the doing stuff in class aspect has changed how I teach. So, it's kind of negotiating your own way into it, as opposed to doing it from the top down. You have to do it. It's a lot more exciting to do it your own way.
Yeah, and I just add, if you've got TAs that you're coordinating as well, there's a lot more to think about. It's just working for me. students with me. Depending on who I'm talking to. And it can, just some extra different kinds of attention need to be paid when you're working in, when you're trying to flatten a 3-tiered hierarchy than a 2-tiered hierarchy when everyone's all in the same place at the same time. And that's where actually the Green Hughes and Anna Gotboy found flipping theory for them was a way to make sure that some of their TAs who were great and some of them who were not up to speed and were understandably not interested in devoting all of their time into developing top-notch theory pedagogy. They used the videos as a way to ensure that the students were getting the right content. And then taking advantage of having performers and composers and theorists and historians, all different kinds of musicians as TAs. Well, they all have different strengths in terms of how to help students through the material, and they may not be the theorists. They may not know that much about the field beyond the textbook yet, but they have a lot of great ideas on how to help the students work through the tasks of analysis, composition, and imaging, and things. And so they found that by having the theorists make the videos or assign the readings that everyone would read, and the face they saw there was the theory faculty, who was also, now they had a connection with someone who was this mythical figure in charge, but now it's like, oh, I have some kind of connection with this person, and I can see them in the hall, I can stop and ask a question. But then class became more attuned to the things that the TAs were actually best at in their own musicianship at that point in their training and their growth. And so when done in that kind of a setup, it can work really well. And that's one reason that I'm moving away from some of the inquiry-driven things, which are really well when it's just me and the students, but really hard to get a grad TA or an adjunct, or even like a colleague that we're coordinating or trying to pair with to get on the same page as before starting. That is a big shift in how you teach. And going a little more to, okay, here's some content, here's a quiz to make sure we've memorized the information. Now let's start to assimilate the concepts with clicker questions, which are really easy when people are engaged, and it's pretty straightforward for the students. And then go to the sections with the grad students. Now, okay, let's have one piece, and let's just dig into this whole big thing. Apply what you learned. Now, with someone who's got good musical sensibilities, whether or not they're a theorist, and all of the information, you got the information from the professional theorist. Now you're getting your hands dirty with someone who knows how to manipulate music really well. So there's, just some extra things to think about when you're dealing with the 3 or 4-tier hierarchy. Now the other part of the session title was what goes into a good instructional video.
I was thinking that the article you tweeted is like a great one, the Anna Gotboy article. Yeah. Hacking Music Theory Classroom, Hacking Music Theory Lecture. It's fantastic. It's short. It's got 5 really good principles. They are compress the topic because students can repeat things on the video rather than needing to say them multiple times yourself and forcing them to repeat it. Keep up the pace. Keep the videos short because attention tends to drift. Make the video interactive so you can say, do this problem, pause the video, and I'll tell you the answer when you press play again. And provide an alternative because some students do not like to just go watch videos on a computer. But that is a really fantastic article, one that I like a lot. One thing that we also talked about last year was that if you do make videos, they don't have to be perfect. Yeah. And people were talking about, as you do this, you need to think, am I going to use this again? And if you're sure that you're going to be able to do it perfectly such that you can use it for the next 10 years, then by all means spend all the time in the world on it. But if you're like, I'm probably going to use this year and then redo it next year, just put it together. Don't worry about stuttering. Don't worry about the occasional dead end. That's the way the classroom time goes, right? And so, yeah.
So this is Phil's chart.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying. If you're going to use this a lot, put more time into it, make it look really nice so that you don't feel 2 years down the line, this is garbage, I have to redo it, and you keep doing it over again. If you're not going to use it again, just throw it together, say, hey, here's a really quick thing for this group of people. You never want to be here spending a lot of time on something you're going to use once. And you'll look sloppy if you're up here. But if you're like, hey, I do things where we have 2 or 3 class days on a piece, there's a couple things we didn't get to, and I don't have time to lecture through it at the end. So I'm making the video and an assignment for the next week to watch. It's 5 or 10 minutes where I put the score on my computer and I just talk and I point at stuff with the mouse. Maybe play a little audio, like, oh yeah, we found this in class, so we found this, it was really good insight. And if we dig in a little more, we can see that pop up here and here and here. So if you do a paper on this piece later, you might want to follow up on that. Just really quick throwing stuff out. And that's fine because it has the advantage of being very personalized. It's for them to respond to things that they've said and done. And so they don't care that it's not flashy. You made it for them, you went to this trouble. And yeah. Accessibility is important. Universities and MOOC providers are getting sued for captions on videos. CU just got out of some sort of special attention from the Department of Ed or the ABA, DOJ, keeping eyes out for stuff like that. So the original set of videos for Open Music Theory didn't have captions. As I'm making new ones, I'm constantly doing that. But it also gives an alternative for people who don't want to watch the video. They can read the transcript. And then if the transcript that came from the captions makes perfect sense, they can read that in a minute instead of watching a 3-minute video or reading in 3 instead of 10, whatever, and then that's fine. But usually there'll be something like, oh, maybe I do need to watch this to get this part, and they can fast forward to that section and see it. When I take MOOCs, I speed up the video if I just want to listen. I slow down if I'm taking notes, but I tend to speed up, and that's what Eric Mazur, the peer instruction researcher, says in general about student videos. And I don't know if this is data or his impression, but it's definitely been my experience with students. I either check out while watching, or I speed it up so that I can keep up with it at the pace that most people make. And in my online class on flipped class, a bunch of faculty participating in class, made videos for their classes, and I think I recommended to everyone that they speed up their talking, that they put fewer words on more slides, so things are changing, but there's a more focus of attention at a given moment, which Anna says, and they'd all read that, but I don't think we all realize how much faster we want to speak on a video than we would at the Blackboard. Just there's a psychological difference for the students. Even if they are taking notes, it just feels better to go fast and pause than to listen to something slow, especially if you're not writing anything down. I think it's really laborious.
It's worth thinking about some of the differences between a video and printed material. Printed materials can have indexes, you can leaf through them, you cannot do that with a video unless you put bookmarks in the video somehow, which is cumbersome and doesn't always work for people. So that's one reason to keep them short on one topic. So that, because if there's a topic buried in the middle somewhere and students want to review, they have to.
Can I borrow your laptop for a second? The adapter is there. I want to show a resource. That's okay. Let's keep talking while I pull it up. Because what you make videos for is also an important thing to consider. So I'm going to show one open music theory. Ooh, autocompletes.
Clearly, I've been there.
Yeah, every once in a while, I'll have a student who's like, what's the course website? Is it D2L? And I haven't used D2L until very recently. And then, and I start telling them, they start typing in autocompletes, and I'm like, okay. you need the website. Okay, so this is improvising a sentence with schemata. Oh, it's not this is something that actually Mark Arnett and Brian Jones helped me make. As we were introducing this may actually come up in the session as well. But the task in RL skills, instead of doing sight reading of these, was to improvise so we can get them thinking through the concepts as they're making music. And so we link at the beginning to written and graphic in the sense of charts, resources on the classical sentence and some schema summaries. We give one example as text, and then there's audio here from Spotify, so we can get really solid performances and not have to worry about any rights issues. And then we have some bullet points. These are things that come from the analysis, but there are things to apply. This is not something I would want to present in a video because I want them to consult this repeatedly as they work. So as much as we can get it, it all fits on one screen.
and it's nice and clearly set apart so they can just pull this up as they're working. Then use video to go through some things that they can't get really readily just by reading and going back and forth between the score. So I'm actually sitting at the piano and talking while I play. And this is something that might happen in class. This is the opening slide is iMovie standard title slide, and then the rest is just my video camera pointing at me in my office on that piano. No sound held, just a little flip video camera pointed at me. And then we give them some models that they can work on here. This is some interactive notation stuff we developed where it's the skeleton, and then they can go in and add some embellishments that might make sense, and then try playing them. And so this kind of gives them Meyer printer, and then Passo di Pietro, or a Jupiter Passo di Pietro. There's kind of different models of presentation continuation cadence that they could try out. We gave them a comprovisation assignment where they had to record themselves improvising, but they could take as many takes as they wanted. So if they were good at improvising, just record the improv, send it in, or record 3 or 4 and send it the best. If they need some help, they could use those modules to flesh out some possibilities and then just get it under their fingers so that they're getting used to performing and what it feels like, even if they're composed. And then Mark went through and recorded some Alberti basses in C major 4/4 for a bunch of the individual schemas that they could play over, and some chains that form a sentence, the kind of things that they would do in their exam. And so I'm showing this just to show as kind of some tips for making videos and online resources, what you would make in what format, because I think this actually worked out to be one of our better units. So we, over the course of 3 weeks of class, put this together, thinking about what made the most sense. So video, I reserved for the things that can't be done easily in text, but they'll probably get engaged once, maybe follow up a second time. And then the things that are going to engage repeatedly, I put into text so that we're not worried about bandwidth. They can easily have it out and ready to go as they're working, and they can easily search for it and just kind of scan through the resource. Oh, this is what I need, rather than trying to search through the video, which if this one had captions, which I need to add now. But if it did, they could turn the captions on and slide through until they see the words, but even that can be a bit of a pain, especially on mobile or low bandwidth. So thinking about, just thinking really carefully about what do I want the students to do, what do the students need, how often are they going to engage this, in what way, when they're doing what other things, and letting that be a guide for how you decide what kind of technology to use. I mean, just like we do in class, when are you talking, when you play audio, when you play the piano, like these are all, now online, so when you use a video, when you use a graphic, when you use an audio, when you use accompaniment that they might play along with, and use text, it's the same kind of decision framework. But we don't want to just sloppily say, oh, I'm flipping my classroom setting videos, because that ends up being more work than it needs to be, and not always best for them. And we can ask them how they're using it. I mean, you can get data, you can get stats, you can put Google Analytics in there, look at your YouTube stats. But it's also good to ask them, was that video helpful? Because they'll tell you, it was a little too long. I had a hard time paying attention. But all the information was really important. And well, could you split it up or talk faster? They might say, or it was good to see you make all those mistakes and correct them, but I didn't make those mistakes, and so I didn't really need that. And then someone else will say, oh, but that was really good because I made that mistake in class, so it was good to I like seeing it. And then they'll start arguing with each other. But yeah, it's good to, which is always helpful.
So dissension.
Yeah, well, it's like when you're going to your comp exams, when the faculty are arguing with each other, you've done something right, you're safe. If the students are arguing with each other, then of course the evaluation should be safe. Not necessarily, but then they get to see how it's advantageous for others. And then, okay, so you can skip over that next time, but I'm still going to make it because these people are finding value.
So that, what you just showed us, is that something they would be grappling with outside of class?
Yes.
Or you don't use that inside of class?
I'll usually have them load it up and get to that bullet list, or the link to the list of schemas and say, so we're going to try a chain with these 3 schemas. So if you don't have those memorized, load that up. And then I have it set up, they're really small charts. If you have like an iPhone or something, you can get one schema
perfectly on the screen. And so it kind of forces them to start memorizing some things because you can't keep all the ones you need on there at once unless you take some notes, and then the extra work might motivate them to memorize earlier than I'm requiring them in the assignment. But I would have them load up some of that stuff in class. I often do oral skills in the computer lab, so they have notation software, they have playback, and then that stuff can be up while they're doing their active work. But again, it disengages them from each other when they turn away to look at their computer. So if they want to engage each other, that motivates some memorization. And you can see, oh, it is valuable to memorize this, not because he said so as a quiz, but because it's hindering my ability to do what I want to do. But they would not engage the video in class. And unless we were doing something where it was related to their prep work, and they couldn't do it like, okay, so you all go over there and do the prep work you should have done. I'll teach over here, which I've done. And usually that, if it's just a few people, that can motivate also without grades, just because now it's a little social consequence. Other thoughts, questions?
Just one analogy very quickly. A colleague of mine gave this to me once, that we consider ourselves more like baseball coaches. Everybody's doing their thing. Go by and help them with the form. Go by and help them with it. You know, that type of thing stands out to me in terms of the type of active environment, classroom environment.
Yeah, and I like baseball as an analogy more than football, because like football, the coach tells you what to do, and you get in trouble if you don't do it. Baseball, there are those very scripted roles, so there is basic information and basic rules of the game that you need to get down before you're actually able to work, which I think is true in music. There are just some things that you have to get this down before you can do the real thing that you want to do. But we want to get them doing that real thing as quickly as we can. But then once you're in that position, there's a lot of improvisation, and then improvisation is aided by knowing all of those little things. And so going back and forth between that can be a good motivation to learn those little things, and also an opportunity to use it. And as long as we don't wait a semester until they get discouraged. In fact, I'm still bugging the head of my son's soccer league to write an article for hybrid pedagogy, not soccer pedagogy. He goes to all these like cognitive physiology and sports pedagogy conferences and seminars, and does a really good job of training the volunteer coaches. And it's all critical pedagogy, active studentry, work. And it's really good stuff. There's a lot of overlap there. And I think when we can draw a sports metaphor, a practice room metaphor, a chamber music metaphor, that can really help. Because then it's not, this is the class I'm required to take because someone else said so. And then maybe even their studio teacher or their past studio teachers or conductors have kind of talked down to the academic side of things potentially. And I mean, I feel like we don't do that. I tend to get a lot of our performance colleagues here are this is really important. We got to make sure that everybody has what they need to do it well, which is good. But that's not the case everywhere, and it's not the case for the past necessarily when it comes to as freshmen. And so anything we can do to let them know, it's not just some pre-rep class, but this is part of your musical growth. It's helpful.
How much time do we have?
Go until 11:20. So we have 4 or 5 more minutes, or we can just work early. Can I put you on the spot as a prospective TA who's never been part of one of these classes? What does this sound like or feel like to you, or what questions might you have?
It sounds like what you mentioned earlier. It's like thinking of it as an English or an English class format or an oral skills class where you're just where it's all the students are doing things. I think that's good, especially for the early morning classes. Like you mentioned, what's getting the students involved. We did that. I took German for a year, and we did that a lot. It was all graduate TAs, and we spent a little bit of time in like lecture and most of those activities and worksheets and group work and stuff. And sometimes it was kind of annoying to have to get up and move around, but I think it helped a lot. So yeah.
It can be both annoying and helpful.
Yeah.
And there are some
Yeah.
students who realize both of
Yeah.
those simultaneously.
Yeah. Especially because we were doing a lot of like silly little games during class and putting them plays just to learn basic language. So it felt kind of silly, but it was actually really helpful.
Yeah, the large freshman class here is in the chamber hall, and so they're fixed seats all pointing in the same direction. It's really designed for lecture. And my friend Jesse Stommel, one of the founders of Higher Pedagogy, always has his students the first day of class talk about the affordances and limitations of the space that they're in. And so one of the affordances of this space is that we can move the chairs around, and we can do a lot with that. We can move the piano. We have a lot of whiteboards. There's enough whiteboards for every student in most of the classes that we hear for them to use them if they're in groups. And so those are good. There's pretty few, which is why we're here instead of one many sessions. But like a limitation, there's one stereo, the podium is fixed, and everything is directed towards that side if we're using that equipment, and it's hard to move around. In that room, like the chairs don't move, and so group work, it's hard for me to get into the groups unless they're all sitting on the aisles. So we sometimes get rid of people in middle seats so that they can be near the aisles so that our TA and I can visit the groups. But then some students will know that and will like hide in the middle seats where it's hard to get to. And so having conversations like that with the students, like asking, okay, what is this room good for? And what of this relates to what our goals are for this course can also help sell them on some of the different things we're doing. Well, this isn't actually a good room to do what you're used to for this class. It's a really good room for these other things. Or like, why wouldn't we take advantage of these whiteboards? Like, I could fill them up in 50 minutes, no problem. Or you can fill them up. You can have a little corner you can erase and you can change things. And you can try things out and you can work together on that, which do you think is going to lead to better growth? You know? And usually they'll come up with the right answers. Sometimes I'm surprised at the right answer, the one supported by research, or the one that I want to know. You know, sometimes they're like, no, I do understand better when someone just tells me what to do instead of me figuring it out for myself or getting a chance to practice it along with some guided expertise. You'd rather have me just talk to you for an hour and then 12 hours later, you'll try it out on your own. You know, and you know, I can usually come up with sometimes they're that used to it, but we can start to open that up, and the more we open that up, you know, since we've mentioned Paulo Freire already, but the students have the revolution. We can't have it for them. We're going to just kind of plant the seeds that awaken some of these realizations that this might be better, or this is at least worth trying out, or at the very least, the instructor is doing this because as far as he or she knows, this is going to be good for me to do. So I'm going to trust them at least for a while and see how it goes. And so, yeah, plant the seeds.
It seems like you might have touched on this already, how you don't have to be 100% flipped all the time, but getting sort of this hybrid, especially for those that are uncomfortable with this kind of scenario, or those students that say, no, I just want you to talk to me. Maybe having, 5-10 minutes of lecture and then more time for activity. You kind of know both worlds, at least first.
Yeah. That's where peer instruction is a really good early thing because it's pretty close to lecture. The instructor's in charge, they're running the show, they're running what's on the screen, but the students are starting to interact, they're starting to ask their own questions and really engage the material. Also, if I have small group work, I'll often give a 5 to 10 minute lecture at the end. So here's what you guys didn't get. Let me just give you the answers, to start with, so you can compare that on your own. And here's a couple big questions that came up I want to make sure we understand. Or here's a couple big things that no one engaged, but it's important. And so I can make sure that at the end of class, okay, those of you that have been uncomfortable doing this on your own, I'm going to comfort you by imparting some wisdom to you that you didn't get on your own, so that you have them both at your disposal when you leave. And so little things like that can help as well. In a 50-minute class, you spend 5 minutes on like an opening quiz, or just kind of getting warmed up, and like here's the administrative stuff for the day, and then 10 minutes at the end of giving them some content, and then they've got readings and stuff, and then you're down to 35 minutes of weird stuff, which isn't that bad. It starts and ends with, okay, the person in charge is in charge, and that can be enough to kind of, okay, no, we've got a couple approaches here. It's well organized, and it seems to be, they each serve their own purpose, and then designed for that. Cool, so let's take a break. I think we're back here in 10 minutes. Double check the schedule to open up. I'm pretty sure it's 11:30 for whatever's next.
No, what is next?
I'll check here. I've been totally ignoring Twitter, so sorry guys. I'll come back to it.